All right, so thinking about operational audits for a little bit, that's learning objective 4. And again, operational audits basically could still consider all of these components, but just as it relates to the operations of the firm. And again, it can relate to all these different levels of the firm. So for example, if they wanted to look at a division that does manufacturing, right? Well, how efficient is the manufacturing process, right? How efficient are they in terms of being able to produce at the lowest cost possible, given the quality they want? Are the steps being followed in terms of trying to reduce waste, right? Those are the kind of things that an operational audit could look at, but they're focused again on that slice of the cube. And again, these will be done mainly by internal auditors, although you could conceivably have an external party come in. For example, the ISO 9000 is essentially, those audits are essentially operational audits. But largely it's going to be internal auditors doing these audits. And so looking at like an operating unit, you can evaluate essentially how well the firm's objectives are being met in that operating unit. There's different divisions they might look at. So for example, with UNCC, the internal auditors for the university, they do operational audits, and they would separate these out into different portions of the university, right? And so you're not going to do all of these generally in a given year. You might have a rotation where you might do, 3 of these every year, right? And it goes in a rotating every 2 years or 3 years is when you expect to do a second operational audit or another operational audit. And so because of the limited manpower, you're not going to be doing this every year. So this is the kind of the layout of an operational audit in terms of the steps, the definition and purpose. That's essentially the scope of the audit. What are we trying to evaluate? There's a familiarization stage where we're trying to obtain knowledge of the firm. You might look at the objectives, assuming you have the operating unit, you might look at the objectives of the unit, how it's set, how it's structured in terms of the hierarchy, and then how does it operate, who are its major suppliers or customers. Preliminary survey, that's kind of the initial set of field work. You have a set of preliminary conclusions where you identify some areas of the operating unit. So then you're going to look at the audit program, what kind of tests you're going to plan, who you're going to use, when you're going to do the work. When you do the work, in terms of executing, collecting the evidence, and then the next step is reporting on the findings. And one key point here I want to make is when you do these reports, this draft report ends up going to the individuals in the operating unit that are in charge, right? Because you don't want to, as an internal auditor, have some surprise finding that gets communicated to a superior level, and then all of a sudden now you've created some bad blood with the operating unit, right? And so you would send that draft report to those individuals, have them look at it and make sure that they at least understand where you're getting the information from, understand your conclusions. And if you've missed something, that's an opportunity for them to let you know that, hey, what about this, right? And so you can include that in the formal report. And then the follow-up is really kind of the next period. You come back and look to see what's the status of any deficiencies that you found. Have they made changes? And you might do a brief re-examination of the area to see if what they've put in place is actually functioning, right, in order to address the deficiency. Okay, and just the last point I want to make here about the operational audit is this is really similar to the 6 steps that we have identified for a financial reporting audit, right? Kind of this planning the audit up front. You have to make sure you understand what the objectives are, what the purpose is, what the scope is. Familiarization is kind of obtaining understanding. Preliminary assessment, or preliminary survey rather, is doing that. risk assessment, where you're assessing the risk of material misstatement. Program development is the designing further audit procedures. The field work is actually performing those audit procedures, completing the audit, and reporting the findings is essentially the step where we're forming the opinion and issuing the report. So there's a lot of similarities here, right? So if you understand the general auditing processes, then you're gonna be able to apply it to a lot of different areas. Internal auditors just have different names, but a lot of it is the same meat, right? Because auditing ultimately is the same in its generalities, but differs in its specifics based on the context. All right, so that'll do it for this operational piece. I'll come back on another video for the rest of it.